Hello, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for joining today's session on the post-COVID way to work. Disruption creates opportunity. Before we jump into today's session, on behalf of Morgan McKinley and Adobe, we would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone in the front line who has helped us through these difficult times during COVID-19, which will be shown in this short video. And just a quick note, you may need to adjust your volume on this.
What the world needs now is love, so we love. It's the only thing that there's just too little of. What the world needs now is love, so we love. Oh, not just for some, but for everyone. Just too little love. What the world needs now is love, so we love. No, not just for some, but for everyone.
Such a beautiful tribute there, and I hope you all enjoyed that. Now I'd like to introduce you to
we still have you.
Sorry. Now I'd like to introduce you to our presenters, Alan Russell, Japan and Asia Pacific Talent Director from Adobe, and Rob Sheffield, Managing Director, Greater China for Morgan McKinley. And just a note, we will be answering your questions at the end of the session, so please feel free at any time to put your questions in the Q&A functionality. And if your questions don't get answered today, we will be sharing the recording later next week. So thank you so much. Over to you, Rob.
Rob, can you unmute yourself?
Sorry, thank you very much, Tara. Sorry about that, slight technical difficulty. Firstly, it's a privilege to be doing this, and I think it's very humbling to see that video. And we're all at different stages of COVID, and there's been a lot of content, and there's been a lot of webinars put out about COVID. And I think today, Alan and I wanted to talk about the positives and the opportunities. And if we start with our why, I think although we are different businesses, through the conversations that we've had, we share similar values and similar missions around making a difference. So for us today, it's about, yes, we're post-COVID in some senses, living COVID in others, but it's about what are the opportunities and what do we see? There is a Q&A function on Zoom, so please do use that. We'll be answering questions at the end. And for those of you that are perhaps not familiar with Alan or Adobe, I'll hand you over to Alan.
Thank you very much, Rob. Firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity to share this time with you, Rob, and with everyone that's taken the time to listen this afternoon. As Rob introduced, my name's Alan Russell. I have the fortunate pleasure of leading talent acquisition for Adobe in what is the fastest growing regions for our organization, Asia Pacific and Japan. I've spent now coming up to 20 long years and very enjoyable years in the world of talent acquisition in a variety of different roles and organizations throughout the course of my career. I do have to say the last 6 months have been the most challenging and somewhat fulfilling in terms of the way that we as an organization have responded to the circumstances that we're in. An email I received last week from our CEO, Shantanu Narayan, stated that great companies are defined by how they lead through adversity, and super proud of every single individual in our organization, in the resilience they've shown and the adaptability they've shown in managing themselves and their professional and personal working lives through this situation, but really importantly, how Adobe has been on the front foot in leading us as a company. So yeah, super proud about that. And Rob, to introduce yourself.
Similarly, I'm aging ourselves a little bit here, I think, but yeah, I've spent 20 years building and running businesses in staffing, HR and tech, and the past year and a half at McKinley, for which some people may be more familiar with, having spent the past 33 years working across recruitment within financial services. However, we've also spent that time really reinforcing one of our core values, which is to change people's lives. And that's a rather grand statement, but if we think about it from the perspective that it's about our behavior, quality of service, what we commit to, we're privileged to work with hundreds of clients and thousands of people a year fixing problems. And certainly over the past sort of 2 decades, that's largely been around technology, IT, outsourcing, project services and contracting. So it's been a fairly interesting time, I think, for both of us operating across the region over the past 12 months. And we're definitely learning probably more than we thought we ever would, operating as what you say is one of the most challenging environments. But let's talk about how it's been. I would love to understand from you what Adobe have been doing with regards to the keys to success around employee well-being, transparency and communication.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So ultimately, the most important thing for our organization throughout this time has been leading with empathy. So, we have put the employees or our employees and their psychological safety as priority number one. As importantly, we need to make sure our customers are being served and being looked after, but the psychological safety of our organization has underpinned all the key decisions that we've made moving forward through COVID-19. And as you rightly said, Rob, different regions and different locations are going through different phases of COVID-19. But what hasn't changed for our organization and a key to our success in what we see in the region coming out the other side of COVID, hopefully sometime soon, is that it's a trying time for us all. It's the master's degree in crisis management for companies that, none of us would have ever done had this situation not arisen. So the number one key to success is the leading with empathy as a company. The second is employee well-being, and it kind of goes with the notion of empathy, but doing things and acknowledging that people are going to need different times and different spaces to be able to go through the emotions and the journey that they're going through as we all live through COVID-19, of which we'll look back in history and say, hey, we lived through a global pandemic and we come out the other side. And that's for all of us, that's going to be something to be really, really proud of. And finally, from an Adobe perspective, just really authentic transparency. So, we know that there's news and information that we're going to receive as a company and as employees that we may not necessarily feel great about. And, office shutdowns and returning to the office is one of those things. But Adobe has really been on the front foot in terms of communicating openly and communicating honestly, and a real genuine and authentic way of doing that. And I kind of summarize this. It's really thinking about the human beings that work for our organization and what is right for them first and foremost. And as I said earlier in the intro, I'm kind of super proud of being part of this organization because of the value that it creates around, employee well-being. From an Morgan McKinley perspective, what's your view?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think transparency in communication has been paramount. The empathy and understanding of the individuals is extremely important. And we've seen a number of businesses move at different speeds, trying to adapt, trying to communicate in the most effective way. I think that the message that I'm probably most proud of from our board and from the management team and what's been filtered down through the organization is firstly around the consistency in our approach. And that was around the focus on our people and helping people feel productive and be productively employed. But foremost, as you point out, their well-being, and I think how organizations react and how we've reacted will certainly shape our business moving forward. So for me, it's been about empathy. It's been about understanding that people are experiencing different things. And we are, like you, a multi-regional business, so communication gets interpreted in different ways. So that's been extremely important. And I think the one message from everyone in our business is we want to support our people. We appreciate our people. And we've done a lot of work with clients around that, as well as you say, in terms of that transparency and that communication to their teams. If we were to think about the opportunity, and you and I have spoken a little bit about this, and I think we agree that the companies predominantly have to think about three things right now. What's new? Is digital onboarding really new? How are they innovating? What are they seeing that's innovative? Product lines, for example, same product, different channel. We've seen a lot of, and what have we learned? And I was laughing yesterday with someone because they told me that the most meaningful thing that they'd learned was the actual meaning of the word essential. So from your perspective, at Adobe, what are you seeing with regards to that and people and culture?
Yeah, I kind of take the lens of progressive organizations, and I'm fortunate to consider Adobe to be one of the progressive organizations I'm referencing. The first one is, there was a phrase in a meeting I was in this morning. We kind of originally were thinking cross-functional skill development, and what does that mean? Someone distilled that really simply for me this morning and said it's all about talent sharing. So if we take our organization and we understand that there's peaks and troughs in terms of demand of work in different segments of our business, what we've been able to do, and I'll reference the HR, or what we call the employee experience organization as a case study, we're able to redeploy or share our talent into other parts of the organization, given that the time that we're in means that our hiring volumes are not as large as they have been in the past, and we're not running at 100% capacity from a talent acquisition perspective. So what that's given us is the ability to redeploy or to share the resources we have into talent development, into the employee resource center, into many other parts of our organization. And the benefits, obviously, from an employee perspective, are they're learning new skills and experiences, which grow their career. But from an organizational perspective, we're developing a much more fungible workforce that will mean career opportunity and better utilization of the people that work for our business. So that's a really, really key one that I see into the future. COVID has ultimately accelerated the possibility for employees to expand their career into different parts of the organization, and for the organization to realize that we've invested in these people, and whilst they're doing one thing today, they can definitely thrive and succeed in doing another thing. The second that kind of coincides with that is just a heightened sense of time and space to focus on personal and professional development. And I think, again, progressive organizations have really doubled down on allowing the space and time for employees to focus on their personal and professional development. And in my organization, it's something that we speak about and we focus on in every staff call. And there's like really a range of initiatives that are really allowing employees or my team members to explore their pathways from a learning and development perspective. And finally, employee wellness, I spoke about it earlier. One of the things that I wanted to share with the audience today is we introduced something called Wellness Wednesday. And we know that wellness is so important in this time, as I think it will be into the future for every employee of every organization. But Wellness Wednesday, in essence, is from Wednesday afternoon, call it midday onwards. We don't book any meetings or video conferences from 12 p.m. onwards to allow our employees or our team members the space to be innovative, to be productive, or to focus on their own individual wellness in whatever shape that would come in. So, when we kind of think about moving forward, I think there's three things that progressive organizations will carry forward out of COVID-19. Your view?
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations, and I think we're on similar lines. I think internally and externally, what it's forced people to do is really think about redeployment and reskilling. Do you have the right people doing the right jobs, and do you have the right people doing jobs that they perhaps don't enjoy? So I think that's extremely important. I think I love the Wellness Wednesday idea. I think that's fantastic. We've done similar things remotely with virtual picnics and having food delivered to people. And I think all organizations are trying to work out how they maintain that connectivity and keep that physical well-being. I think for us, the remote working piece was very much about meaningful content and meaningful engagement. It was about understanding the impact on people and clients, and obviously the uncertainty they feel, not just with regards to their business continuity plans, but also the vulnerability and on a personal level as well. So I think that was really important. We've seen a lot of the blurring, and it's been well documented around work-life balance, and we've kind of narrowed that into two buckets for us, which is the space physically, and obviously in places like Hong Kong specifically, and other parts of Asia, space is limited. So people working from home don't necessarily want to work from home. They see the workplace as a place to be not only social and to do their jobs, but as a separate almost psychological space. And then obviously the mental side of it as well. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what we do moving forward with flexible working and how we manage that. But look, I completely agree with you in terms of well-being, cross-functional skill sets, the ability for organizations to pivot and keep IP, to keep good people in those organizations is absolutely paramount.
So Rob, thank you. And we kind of have taken a talent management lens on how to prepare better for the future. But for the job seeker, what are you seeing, and what is your organization seeing in terms of the trends moving forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that from a job seeker's perspective, there's one thing that holds true for both that category and clients, and that's people have really struggled to define where their skill sets now sit. They've struggled to define potentially what the future skill set needs to be. So I think that's been a real challenge. I think that people have, in certain areas, really embraced it to almost pause, reevaluate, and look at the opportunity moving forward. And we've just talked about, Adobe and repurposing and giving people the opportunities to do different things in the organization. And that's certainly something we've looked at and we've seen other organizations look at. I think from a hiring perspective, the stats are pretty depressing over the last quarter, certainly for Asia. I think it was a 6.9 million jobless count and a 14.7% increase in unemployment rate. So, however, that said, we are seeing organizations redefine what they're wanting to do. And I think when it comes to the candidate experience, if you're flexible, move to almost what we would term time and materials, that contracting piece, that ability to flex across different opportunities is really important. We've done, interestingly, a lot of back to basics work around CV clinics because people have really struggled with the digital job search aspect of it. And that ranges from optimizing your CV for how ATS parses it, through to how they rank it, and then really simple things around digital / video applications. So prepping for a digital interview, you're not in the room physically, so you're probably having to work twice as hard to build rapport. There may be communication or language differences. Dressing appropriately as you would walking into that physical space is one of the things that people forget about. Even backdrop, and we were talking before this around what backdrop do you have in the background? Do you have a logo? Do you have something simple? So I think those are certainly some of the things. And then how just to have a good digital conversation. How do you get your point across? And I think we've all been on conversations over the past 3, 6, 9, 12 months where tech might not have been our friend, and you're trying to interpret what people are saying, and you're trying to ad lib along the way. So those are certainly some of the things that we've seen. And from your perspective?
Yeah, I think beyond that, just an acknowledgement around from a business process perspective, that as a job seeker or as a new employee, things will be different. And we'll kind of get into that as we evolve this conversation. But whether it's onboarding or whether it's virtual events or anything like that, I think COVID has accelerated the way that businesses operate in a much more digital environment. And what we see is those businesses that are more digitally mature have been able to be more successful through this COVID time. And we can touch on that, throughout the conversation. But as a job seeker, beyond that, I would kind of look at the market and say, right, there is such a propensity around digital transformation, and different industries are more mature than others. But as a candidate, what are the skills I have today? And looking forward in a 12, 24, or 36 month period, where is the potential reskilling opportunity I have now so that I can become more relevant or increase my relevance into the future? And I think that that's something as professionals we all have to do. But the acceleration of the digital world that we live in, particularly for candidates, it's really relevant from a skills development and progression perspective. And I would just, I encourage people to think about the evolution of the way business is being done, look at the skill set that those individuals have, and how we can transition as a candidate into the new world that will naturally continue to evolve.
Very good. So that leads us to opportunity. And you talk about work changing. And I read a stat recently where there were a number of Fortune 500 CEOs interviewed, and they were asked the question, when would they anticipate 90% of their workforce returning to the physical office full time? And 20% answered January 2021. Another 20.2% answered June 2021, and 26% said never, which is, to your point, work has changed. And I think if we think about businesses, from what we see, that they're far more focused on connection now. And we know that the travel industry, workspace, education, self-care are all changing. So from your perspective, with your Adobe lens on within your organization and externally with some of the businesses that you work with, what are you seeing if we talk about this digital revolution, as the phrase is used?
Yeah, so first thing is online processes and the meshing of the physical and virtual worlds that we've lived in. The great example that we spoke about earlier this week is we have an annual conference which basically brings together 20,000 customers in the US. Obviously through COVID, we had to make a decision to postpone or cancel that event, and we had 20,000 tickets issued and people's plane tickets booked and ready to go. What we were able to do as an organization is turn that physical event into a virtual event in the space of 3 weeks. And what that's ultimately taught us from a business process perspective is we need to look long and hard around what we choose to do from a physical and what we choose to do from a virtual perspective. And I think what we'll see is a much more ruthless prioritization around what we can do virtually. And, whether it's video interviewing or whether it's onboarding, a lot of things that we've had to change as a result of COVID-19 have been really positive changes that have resulted in a much stronger net promoter score on the basis of the feedback that we've received. So the first one's kind of online processes and looking as organizations, looking at how we can mesh the physical and virtual. And then the second is more around the way that we engage with brands. So, I'll choose governments. And I think what we will see is the citizen experiences that we have in a very physical way, whether that's your driver's license or your tax. Many organizations or many governments that we're in discussions with in terms of digital transformation have a very high agenda to move into a much more digital world. And ultimately what they're trying to do as part of this is create greater efficiency, obviously, but to create a much more personalized experience as a consumer of those services than ever before. And I think COVID has accelerated, whether it's governments or whether it's retail organizations, whether it's banks. As I said earlier, those businesses that are more digitally mature and were able to pivot quickly are those businesses that are starting to recover a lot faster. Your view?
Yeah, I would agree. I think we talk about connectivity, we talk about data, fixing problems. And I think the businesses that can connect with their people, connect with their customers, their ecosystem, that can use data and fix relevant problems are the ones that are going to be coming out of this in a far better shape. I think I'd probably look at sort of 2 points. One, internally, we made the commitment to yes, be data-led, to yes, fix problems. in and around, whether that's workforce, EVP, mapping, thinking, and that's all fine. But I think for us, it's really been working on empathy with tech, and I think clients need to replicate that in the sense of it's very easy to put tech into your business. It's very easy to talk about digital transformation and how that makes a difference. Quite difficult to implement effectively on a number of levels, and we've certainly seen businesses change service lines, and the idea is correct, but the execution is not to that extent. I think from an educational point of view, if I think about that, clients and their understanding of digital and their brand has been really important. Certainly with a recruitment head on, we operate in a world where someone can apply for a job and that information disappears. And we've done a lot of work with clients on educating response, brand, managing that process, and creating a really seamless digital experience. So I think without waffling on that, those are probably the two elements to that I think are important with regards to how online processes, how we operate virtually for us have been, and certainly what we see within our clients.
Right.
So we are apparently shifting to digital, and we said this on a number of occasions. Is that wrong? Should the phrase be evolving? We know from various publications that 75% of businesses have stated and agreed that they are going to advance their digital transformation. So if businesses going digital is not something new, what are you seeing? How do we operate in this new norm? What do companies need to be doing?
Yeah, interestingly, when I look at the word shift, I now think about it with an acceleration to digital. And as you were kind of talking through what Morgan McKinley are seeing, one of the things that jumped out at me was homeschooling, which we've all had, as parents, we've all gone through. The acceleration of how we utilize digital technologies to homeschool our children was absolutely phenomenal in such a short space of time. But, from a workplace perspective, the obvious one is the work-life integration or the working from home scenarios that we all live through. So, at a personal level, once a new normal comes back, and whatever that new normal may be, let's find out. But an ideal working situation for me, and what I've learned, is that a 3 and 2 working model of 3 in the office and 2 from home will ultimately be my new normal. So, what the last couple of months has taught us, and I would love to be a Zoom shareholder, that's another story, but the technology that we now have and the flexibility that we now have as a result of digital technology is so more advanced than what it would have been 12 months ago. So that's definitely an obvious one, and a new normal that we'll all experience as we kind of continue to manage through COVID. And then, as I said earlier, I think it's a real ruthless look at our business processes and the priorities we have, and shifting what we can to a more virtual or digital environment. And, a great example I can give everyone today, when our office in Sydney, we had a call and we uncovered that our office was shutting down. It was a Friday afternoon at lunchtime. And on the Monday, we had 25 new people about to join our organization. And it was a very well thought out physical onboarding program over the space of 3 or 4 days, with hardware being delivered. What we were able to do is pivot that very, very quickly in the space of a few short hours, and have everyone start their employment at Adobe in a work from home capacity. And as an interesting byproduct of that, the net promoter score of our onboarding was actually higher in a virtual environment than a physical. So what's that ultimately taught us? That we can look at our business processes and be really ruthless around what we should be doing physically and virtually, and blend those two a lot more closely together.
So, I mean, what you're really, in some sense, talking about there is that organizations should really be focused on their infrastructure. Because what's blown me away about what you've just said there, and similarly, I suppose we were a bit further ahead with regards to being in Hong Kong with the year that we've had with protests and COVID, was our ability to have the infrastructure and globally to just flick everyone to working digitally. And I think that caught quite a lot of organizations out. I think for us, my observations would be engagement is key. We talk about 3 and 2, and that's fantastic. And I think flexible working and the environments we're now in, we shouldn't need to be physically present all the time, but it's that introvert extrovert piece that always plays on my mind. The people that want to be in the business, the people, and we were having a laugh the other day, weren't we, about being recruiters. We like talking to people. We like physical presence. So it is that balance around how you create how you create meaningful engagement whilst you're not necessarily in the workplace. Infrastructure we've mentioned. I think looking ahead, automation, and we know it will make certain jobs redundant. We see a lot of middle management positions that could be removed in certain organizations forever. I don't see that as a negative. I think it's our responsibility as organizations to ensure we reskill and redeploy those people either within our organizations or to give them more skills to go out and do more. And I half wonder whether the phrase slashy generation, which was used a long time ago in a conference that I was in, will resurface in some way, where we just have flexible workforces that are project managers by day, rock stars by afternoon. So we could take it into a number of avenues around, regionally, what do we see looking ahead? But I think it's probably best to kind of move to some key takeaways and maybe open it up to a bit of Q&A.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So, Alan, has the world changed in a positive way?
I think so. I've used the term acceleration, and there's so much positive that has come out of COVID. I mean, not to mention the environmental impacts of all of us driving less or traveling less and all of those things. But I think businesses are looking at the way we do business and will ultimately continue to transform forever. Or as a candidate, yes, the world has changed, but there is an opportunity to continue to evolve and progress your career in a much more digital orientated environment. So, I think there are a lot of positives to take out of COVID, and whilst you're in the midst of it, it feels really, really hard. I know I've gone through an emotional journey throughout the course, as I'm sure many other people have. I kind of feel like there are a lot of positives to take, but there is a world that is ultimately accelerating much faster now than what it was before COVID actually commenced. And I think we all need to think about the way that we're doing business in a much more digitally orientated form.
Very true. I think my takeout on it was around, and again, I think we agreed on this, what we do as organizations, setting the tone. And I think if we become more digitally enabled, the one question I was thinking about yesterday was around trust. If more conversations and more meetings are had digitally, we're all going to ask the question, what's being done with data? How do we trust, how do we build trust in a digital world? And there's been many examples of that being eroded over the past, certainly past 2-3 years. But I think outside of the trust piece, everything that we do will set the tone for the next decade. How we deal with our people now, how we communicate, how we build those layers of trust with partners, with clients, with people internally. So I agree. I think in many ways, well, as you said, the world's changed. And for me, that driver would be set the tone and build trust.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And beyond that, the notion of not being fearful and change is accelerating much faster than we all imagined. But there are a lot of opportunities brought upon by digitization, and they will continue to be that way. And as the theme of the conversation today is disruption creates opportunity, this is probably the most disrupted environment I've ever worked in and we've ever worked in before. But I think hopefully everyone that has had the opportunity to dial in today understands that coming out of this, digitization and the acceleration of digitization in everything that we do, whether we're consuming products or talking to our favorite brands online, or whether we're going through a video interviewing process, there's a lot of opportunities that are going to come out the other side. And I think we will see in all the economies in the Asia Pacific and Japan regions a pretty strong bounce back in terms of business opportunity for us all.
Yeah, completely agree. From my perspective, I just want to thank you and Adobe for contributing to this. We're going to move on to some Q&A. We spent a week sort of banding around ideas, and we've had a lot of content, and we had to sort of put it into 39 minutes. So I think we've done better than previous attempts. So look, very appreciative of you and your team's time and the insights. I suppose, should we hand it back over to Tara for any potential questions that have come in and any Q&A?
Yeah. Thanks for your time, Rob, and everyone. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Al. That was really useful, and I hope everyone on the call has found that really beneficial as well. We do have a couple of questions coming through, and again, anyone that does have questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A function. So the first one, how realistic is cross-functional skill set development when it comes down to assessing one's performance and his or her career development, especially in terms of promotion?
Yeah, great question. The way that I think about this is twofold. One, the culture of the organization and kind of what is important to you as a business. And I think as a culture, you've got to create a sense of safety for people to be able to explore cross-functional skill development. At Adobe, like when we look at promotion, I think you've got to think about it not only in a vertical perspective, but in a horizontal axis in terms of cross-functional change of roles or change of careers. So, performance management frameworks are different in any organization. We run a check-in process, so we don't have an annual performance review. So maybe it's a little bit easier for our organization, and it's somewhat of a very fluid conversation. So I can't comment for those that have a much more rigid performance management framework. But I think if you have the right culture in your business and the right talent management processes that underpin that, it is achievable. We've started with our own talent organization, and we're expanding that out across the rest of the organization. But the rewards for the individuals or the employees that are going through this cross-functional skill development are absolutely phenomenal. And each individual that has gone through this program for us is super motivated and super engaged to follow passions that they didn't previously know that they actually had.
So a great answer. I think from our perspective, I view two lenses. Externally, if you're thinking about transition of skills, there are plenty of things that we see people do that in current jobs that lend themselves to other jobs. So if you think about people with mathematics degrees who are doing audit, we see a large percentage of those people being looked at to reskill into data science, where there are huge shortages in that space. So I completely agree with Alan in terms of it depends on the organization, the shape of the organization and what you're doing. And then if I reflect from a Morgan McKinley perspective, without generalizing, recruitment businesses historically, I think externally have been viewed as, you make a placement, you get paid, and internally have been largely treated in the same way that, you make more, the more money you make, the higher promotion you get. And we view that very differently. We've done a lot of work on behavior and competencies and around people skills, because if you think about our world, it's all about people skills. And sometimes people that make a lot of money aren't necessarily the best people to manage and lead teams or to think about strategy or to innovate. So we've broken down a lot of barriers in sort of our own organization around what the actual criteria for promotion is. What skills do you really need within the job that you're doing? So I think the point is, what does your organization do? What does it look like? And then we all know that the shape of that in terms of reskilling and promotion is largely going to be led by your directors, your CEO, your COO, and down through that organization. If they're innovative, if they're strategic, if they're forward thinking, then you're more likely, I think, to get the opportunity, as you've done in your business, Alan, and I think we've done in ours, to take different paths, to explore different opportunities, perhaps even go and do something and fail without fear of retribution in many ways.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Next question, are there any specific industries in which going digitalized is especially important as you see?
So that's a good question. It's a very broad question. I think if you don't have an element of digital in your business, whether you are the startup person on the street, whether you're in retail, F&B, medical, etc., then you're going to struggle. So I think the nicest example I could give is being in Hong Kong, which is an extraordinary entrepreneurial place. The F&B industry here, and I think globally through COVID, has been hit incredibly hard. And that's not a particularly digital savvy industry. If you think about it, digital for F&B has extended to some extent around using Deliveroo, Food Panda, Uber Eats. And we've seen a number of organizations from small local restaurants really maximize crowdfunding, maximize social goodwill, through to some larger organizations do some really innovative things around engagement and virtual wine tasting, etc. So I know it's not a big blue chip corporate example, but I think the question of digital in your organization is, yes, I believe that it should be in all organizations or businesses. It's a question of, does it add value, and what value do you need it to add, would be my answer to that question.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. My view is really simple, that people buy experiences and not products. So, in a world that we're moving, we're accelerating digital, we have so much choice, and there's a lot of services or products that are commoditized in the industry. And ultimately, any industry that is competing with other organizations, the way I see kind of industries going digital is all industries will continue to evolve the way that they do business from a digital perspective. But you want to create a better experience than your competitor. And ultimately, I believe that's where a consumer is going to make a decision in terms of the relationship that they have with that brand or the product that they ultimately buy. If I shop with a certain organization, I want them to make me feel like I'm the only person in the universe. And I think, a lot of industries that we've seen, in particular banking, hospitality, airlines, many others, retail, digital is accelerating more and more than ever. But ultimately, what I think it comes down to is every organization is going to compete digitally, and they're going to compete in creating a better experience for their customer than their competitor. And those are the organizations that we believe will win.
Can I before Tara asks another question, we were talking about this the other day. I completely agree with you. The only thing that I think is going to be really interesting about that is the same as previous retail experiences where you walk and you have that amazing physical experience. I think you're completely correct. Seamless digital experience is fantastic. We have seen examples of organizations create wonderful digital experiences, and the product's not great. So I do think that from a value perspective, you can work hard to create a wonderful digital experience. If your product isn't great, then your engagement drops after that. And I think that's going to be the real battleground, isn't it? Because I take recruitment as an example. You can create wonderful physical experiences in our industry. You can create a great digital onboarding experience in your organization and ours. But if the actual product, if what we do doesn't add value and isn't meaningful, then it will go the same way as the traditional retail space, I think.
Yeah, the physical and virtual need to be consistent. Otherwise, it all falls over.
Yeah.
And Rob, that's a good segue into the final question that we'll take about digital onboarding. But we are just about at time now, so this will be the final question. And just wanted to reiterate that this recording will be sent through to all of you that are attending today, next week. And just wanted to thank you all so much again for joining today's webinar. And I really do hope that you found it incredibly beneficial. So final question is directed to Alan. Could you share more about the journey in building digital onboarding at Adobe?
Sure. So I'm happy, whoever this person is, if you want to reach out directly and have a one-on-one conversation, and we can go deep on it, because I know we're almost at time. But there's really two audiences in onboarding. There's the candidate, and then there's the hiring manager and the ecosystem that individual is going to be coming into. We had to basically solve for both, because we have a very robust onboarding plan already mapped with meetings booked and expectations set, that we needed to agree on a set of principles or the operating manual in terms of what the hiring manager would be expected to do in a very short space of time, because we wanted the individual joining our business to be highly engaged and have a really positive experience. So that's one axis. And then beyond that is the really strong communication around what the experience is going to be up front. And we needed to solve for that very, very fast. I remember having the entire team together and whiteboarding the journeys of both the candidate and the hiring manager and what needed to happen and who else needed to be notified. So it was a pretty interesting 45 to 60-minute meeting, but it was all about the two sides of the onboarding experience and what we needed to do to pivot and what expectations we could set for the candidate, and importantly, what we were asking the business to do and to change from an onboarding perspective in really, really quick time. But you know, whoever is interested in that, if you want to reach out directly via LinkedIn or over my email, happy to spend some time and go deep on that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, absolutely feel free to reach out to both Al or Rob at any time if you have any questions. They're quite friendly, so they will be more than happy to answer any questions and have further discussions with you. But thank you so much, Rob and Al. Today's been an absolute treat, and really appreciate you taking the time to run this webinar.